Hey guys, Bartlett's Bookshelf or whatever here, and today I'm doing the fantasy creature book tag. This tag was created by my friend Nakia over at Plot Twist, and she also tagged me in it, of course. And yeah, it sounded like a lot of fun. It's just a tag about fantasy creatures in books. I'm always really bad at following up on tag videos, and I don't think I'm very great at doing tag videos, but we'll see how this goes. So hopefully you enjoy. The first question is, what is your favorite fantasy creature from any book or series? That's a very good question. Part of the reason I struggled with this tag for a long time is that I think I'm actually a bit of a fake fantasy fan, because when I was looking at these questions and thinking about them, I was like, you know something, I haven't actually read a lot of fantasy books with really crazy imaginative creatures in them that I can think of. And I know they're out there, but I just had this sort of moment of realization where I was like, I'm not as experienced in this genre as I thought I was, so it really took me a while to come up with answers to this question. But in terms of just writers that I think are very imaginative, who have very interesting ideas in their writing, or just very creative things, creatures, characters, whatever, I got to shout out Clive Barker. I'm still working my way through his bibliography, but what I've read of his I love, and he just has such crazy ideas and creatures. There's the group of monsters in his short story Skins of the Fathers. There's the woman who has the ability to change people's shapes in Jacqueline S. There's the weird animal ghost hybrid creatures in Cold Heart Canyon. There's just a lot to choose from there, and Barker is one of those writers where, like, whenever I read him, I'm just in awe at his imagination and just like, how do you think of this stuff? Where does this come from? What primordial id do these things arise from, and can I have access to some of that? This second question is similar. Which franchise/series do you think has the most creative fantasy creatures? Again, I was thinking long and hard about this, and I was just like, I just don't think I have enough experience in this genre to really say what I think has the most creative fantasy creatures, because a lot of the stuff I've read is very like stereotypical, high fantasy type of stuff. Elves, orcs, dragons, like it's all stuff that's really cool and stuff that I love, but I wouldn't exactly call it like imaginative, or creative necessarily. I do find it interesting when writers find unique spins on sort of well-worn fantasy creatures. There was a novel by Poul Anderson called Three Hearts and a Lion, and that was about this guy going back in time to this sort of like alternate like fantasy world that's like a very European. I think it's inspired by like Danish history, and there's a scene with a dragon in there, and he defeats the dragon using science because he figures out how the dragon's biology works, using like the gases to produce fire and stuff like that, which relates to another question that I'll go into in a bit. So unfortunately, again, I don't really have a good answer for this, but that's just generally what I would say. I do appreciate creative creatures. I just don't feel like I've read enough to really say like, oh yes, it was this specific series that I really enjoyed. So yeah, sorry. But that leads into question 3, which is, if you could create your own fantasy creature, what would it be? What could it do? Again, this was really tough for me. I like to think of myself as a writer, but of course when I'm called on to imagine something for a video, I just completely draw a blank. Because to be honest, it's really hard for me to like pinpoint specific aspects of a creature that I would create, especially one that hasn't been done already a million times. So I guess I can just talk in general, just what I like about creatures. I like creatures that are non-human but are still sentient and able to sort of reason and have thoughts and feelings and a personality. That's why I've always liked aliens in science fiction books. I hate this idea that like humanity and like the human mind is like supreme, and I like seeing different perspectives of creatures that aren't human, that don't have that those sort of inherent biases, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just generally what I like seeing in fantasy creatures. For example, I mentioned there was the Spider-Smith in Magebound that I really liked. I just really like creatures like that are non-human but are still sentient and intelligent. Question 4 is, do you like it when books explain a made-up creature's biology/behavior? Why or why not? And this is related to what I said earlier. As with anything, for me, it just depends on the story. I've definitely read some stories where the creature's biology or behavior is like explained and is part of the narrative, as it ties into kind of the ecosystem of the world and kind of the overall world building. And I really like stuff like that. But at the same time, I also like stories where like weird shit just happens for no reason and they don't feel the need to like get into the nitty gritty and explain every single little detail about how something works. It really just depends on the story. It depends on the execution. For example, Clive Barker is a good example of that, in that his creatures are very imaginative and very detailed in terms of the way that they're presented, but it's not necessarily going into like the strict details of the world building and explaining where these creatures came from and why they're here and what they do and everything. You know, he leaves a lot of things vague. And in some cases, he doesn't explain anything at all, like in his story, "In the Hills, the Cities," with the giant gestalt entities that form together out of the two people, the residents of these two differing towns, you know. And of course, in reality, like that doesn't make any sense. That's not possible. That, you know, how does it work, you know? But it doesn't matter. It's not the point of the story. It's about the mood. It's about the imagination of it, that kind of thing. So it really just depends on the story. I don't subscribe to the notion that like one way of doing something in a story is how it should be for every story. So it really just does depend. But I think there's merits to both sides. So if you could have any fantasy creature as a pet, what would it be, including canon pets, e.g. Clifford the Big Red Dog or Hedwig from Harry Potter? That's a good question. Do werewolves count? I have a werewolf as a pet. Honestly, I'm pretty basic here. I would love to just have a dragon. Dragons are cool. A warg would be awesome. And on sort of a less fantastical note, I mean, I've already had many pet rats over my time, but if I could have like some kind of magical fantasy rat, like if I had a little rat familiar that could do spells or that I could talk to, and, you know, that would be awesome. I would love a little rat familiar to ride on my shoulder, give him a little wizard's hat. You know, I would love that. Not the most interesting of answers, but that's what I would say. That's what I would pick. And then finally, tag some people. So I'm just going to pick three that come to me. I'm going to tag Ollie at Criminali, Michelle from Michelle's Melancholia, and Roy from Yard of Random Books. So yeah, if you guys find this interesting, you don't have to do it. I've been tagged in a bunch of videos lately, and I'm terrible at following up on tags, so don't feel pressured if you don't want to. But you know, my friend Nakia made this tag, and I think it's a really interesting tag, and I'd like to hear what other people have to say. So if you feel compelled to do it, then go right ahead and do it, and I'd love to see it. So yeah, that's my answers for these tag questions. I hope you found that interesting. If you did, like, subscribe, leave a comment. What would be on your list? You know, how would you answer these questions? What are your favorite fantasy creatures? And yeah, until then, I'll see you guys later. Bye.